Today I'm going to be discussing the top 5 criminal defenses that were truly Hail Marys. When we think of criminal defenses, we think of simply the aggravating and mitigating factors of I grew up poor, or any type of racial disparities, or being that it was self-defense, or just simply it was an accident. But there's some defenses that, quite frankly, are creative. The first defense we're going to discuss is the affluenza defense. And the affluenza defense is simply what you hear. The person is stating that because of the affluence that they lived in, they were able to acquire, they had the incapability of understanding or realizing the depths of their wrong. And the person or the attorney that coined this term was the attorney for Ethan Couch, who back in 2013 drove drunk as a teenager, plowed his truck into a group of people and hit them. And there were approximately 13 people that were hit. 4 of them lost their lives in that particular quote unquote accident. And instead of just, taking responsibility for driving drunk like any other layperson would, the attorney stated that because he was coddled as a youth and was so wealthy, he really could not understand the consequences of his actions due to the financial privilege that he was able to acquire, thus stating that he should not be held responsible for the lives lost and the people that he may have maimed in that particular accident. And so because of that, the jury did believe him. And so they suspended his sentence and he did get probation. Now, the next one is the gay panic defense. And unfortunately, this is a defense that it may not be classified as the gay panic, but there are a lot of cases where people were able to say, due to the fact that another male, was flirting with them or possibly hitting on them, they were so fearful of what was going on, they took that person's life. Now, in any other case, if me or you used it, if you were heterosexual, stating that somebody was hitting on me, I couldn't just say I was so fearful that somebody was trying to hit on me that I took their lives. But nonetheless, a lot of people are simply just ignorant. And so there are people that will take someone's life due to the fact that they state the reason why they did something is because somebody was hitting on them and they were in fear of being violated. This particular defense, the gay panic defense in general, was used in New Zealand by a Hungarian tourist, Ferdinand Ambach, who took the life of Ronald Brown, a 69-year-old male who happened to come across Ferdinand Ambach. Now, we have to take it because the only 2 people there were Ferdinand and Ronald, and one person is not alive. So Ferdinand, pretty much we had to weigh heavily on what he was stating happened. And he stated that because Ronald Brown was hitting on him, allegedly, he got his banjo and beat him over the head and then shoved the instrument down the man's throat. Ronald Brown died shortly thereafter. Now, he initially was charged with murder, but due to the argument of the panic of having a gay man hit on him, they were able to drop the charges down to manslaughter. And they were saying the fury that he had was due to the unwanted advances toward him. So he was given a 12-year sentence, which he only served 8, and then he was abruptly deported back to Hungary. The next one that's not really surprising because it's been used many times is a sleepwalking defense. Now, one of the prominent cases that use a sleepwalking defense is the one for Joseph Anthony Mitchell, who back in 2015 stated that he was a chronic sleepwalker or suffering from what is called non-REM parasomnia, where he stated that he put his hands over his 4-year-old son, took his life, and then proceeded to do that to 2 of his other children. They happened to, their lives were spared. Now, he claimed that the reason why he engaged in this particular activities because he was enduring a lot of financial distress, as well as being somebody who's suffering from insomnia, or again, in the case of having non-REM parasomnia, which basically is a disorder that causes people to perform random acts while sound asleep. And because he states that he was suffering from this non-REM parasomnia, he was not able to do criminal intent in taking the life of his child. It wasn't an intent to take the child's life. It was just something that occurred, and he was doing it in his sleep, so you cannot hold him accountable for it because it was never intended for him to take the life of his child. And the prosecutor could not show evidence that he purposefully wanted to take the lives of not only that 4-year-old child, but the remaining children. Now, there is another case that used something similar. It wasn't coined sleepwalking defense back then, but back in 1846, there was somebody named Albert Terrell who was acquitted of taking the life of a prostitute in Boston. He's stating that he was a chronic sleepwalker, and because of this, he put a knife to the prostitute's neck, slit her throat, and was able to set fire to the brothel she was located at, and able to flee to New Orleans, all while asleep. And somehow the jury took that explanation and accepted it, and he was acquitted. Now, in another bizarre defense would have to be the Twinkie defense, or coined during the case regarding Dan White back in 1978, who took the lives of two prominent members of the gay rights community in San Francisco. He took the life of Harvey Milk, which was the first openly gay politician, and George Moscone, who was the pro-rights mayor. Now, his attorney, Dan White's attorney, stated that he had untreated depression, as well as he was eating junk food. And because of that, he had diminished capacity to distinguish right from wrong, thus leading him to take the lives of the two men. Even though he was able to allegedly use the Twinkie defense as a reason of why he committed the crimes against those two men, the defense actually stated that that's not what they really said. They stated that due to his mental capacity being diminished, with, his untreated depression, the consumption of junk food was more of a symptom and not the cause of why he took the lives of those men. But there also, it came out that a lot of the police supported Dan White in what he did to the politician and the mayor, the two politicians, because it appears that after the case was over with, a lot of former policemen stated that they also didn't like the fact that they were homosexuals. And they brought up the fact of the Twinkie insanity defense in passing to Dan White. So even though it is a defense that has been folklore or an urban myth, it is just that, a myth. Yes, people are saying that he got off due to stating that he ate junk food and that ruined his mental capacity to judge right from wrong. But later on, when the attorneys were interviewed, they stated that they didn't argue that the junk food is what made him turn violent. It was the fact that he was untreated with his depression and his eating habits changed, and thus leading him to be more prone to violence due to that fact. Now, many of us have been hangry, combining the two words of hungry and angry, but to say that that made you want to lash out, that's a stretch. But again, the jury bought it. Now, the psychiatrist that saw or spoke in regards to Dan White's condition stated that he was depressed and he started exhibiting behaviors that showed that he was depressed, such as, abruptly quitting his job, shunning his wife, normally having good hygiene, basically being clean cut, He was so into his appearance, and then later on, he started not caring about his appearance. He once was a fitness fanatic and always into having healthy food intake, and then he somehow changed to only having a diet of junk food and sugar-laden soft drinks like Coca-Cola. And the psychiatrist said that junk food can actually worsen someone's existing mood swings. So, with all of that being mentioned, the jury used that as a reason to accept the defense that he did have diminished capacity at the time of him taking those two men's lives. Dan White was ultimately sentenced to voluntary manslaughter rather than the initial murder conviction that many thought he deserved. And he served 5 years in prison. And once released shortly thereafter, a couple of years later, he did ultimately take his life. So it appears that he truly was suffering from depression. Not saying that his crime was an excuse. Um, it's just sad that they sensationalized it rather than treat the root cause, that this is a man that for some reason did not like that his crime was an excuse. Um, it's just sad that they sensationalize it rather than treat the root cause, that this is a man that for some reason did not like that who they happen to love, and also with that he was suffering from a mental illness. And rather than talking about those particular two issues, they made it into a sensationalized story saying that junk food made him do it. Now, the evil twin defense is one that's a very rare defense to use. I mean, obviously, because you have to be a twin. But a prominent or notable case is a case that happened in Malaysia back in 2003. In 2003, a man was arrested and charged for trafficking 166 kilos of cannabis and 1.7 kilos of raw opium. Now, while they were at the scene, in walks his twin. And because they're identical twins, they also arrested him. Now, they did find that one of them did have the keys to the house and thus access to the drugs. However, when they went in front of the judge, being that they had the same DNA and they were identical twins, the judge refused to go further with the case, being that in certain countries like Malaysia, anybody who's dealing with drugs, their sentence is usually their life being taken. And the judge did not want to sentence an innocent man to potentially unalive them when they don't know if it was them or the twin that actually committed the crime. And because the prosecution did not have clear evidence to say which twin did in fact traffic the drugs, the case was dismissed. Hey, this is Jay. Thanks for watching this video. And just like crime never stops, I got some other stories that I need to put together, so I'm gonna see you soon.